Hey everybody, welcome to the very first episode of On the Run with Beards and Dunn. I can't tell you how excited Dick and I are to actually finally get to do this. And you know, we've spent hours today memorizing our podcast, all of our lines, everything we're going to say. And if you believe that, you don't know Dick or I very well at all. And so, yeah, we met for about a minute before we started recording and say, what do you want to talk about? And he said, I don't care. Actually, we did put a little more thought into it than that. You know, Dick and I have had a really great relationship for so many years. And I thought, you know, as a way of kind of building our foundation and getting to all of that, and hopefully you guys will be, you know, kind of inspired and by our story. But you know, what led up to before Dick and I ever got to meet. And you know, I know the common theme that brought Dick and I together is running, and we just loved it. You know, I had a passion for it, and I know Dick's passion is still going strong to this day. And so I've had some questions I've always wanted to ask Dick about his early days. And so I thought we'd start there, kind of laying the foundation is how did Dick and then myself, how did we even get into running? So Beards, question number one I'd like to ask you, why did you ever start running?
Well, Don, that's a great question. And I get that question a lot. You know, as a kid growing up here in Minnesota, you know, my whole world revolved around the outdoors, hunting, fishing, trapping, milking cows. And, you know, I just wasn't really into athletics. I played a little, I guess, little league baseball, if you called that. I wasn't real good at it, but I just was so into the outdoors. And then when I started my junior year of high school, so I was 17 years old. It was 1973, and I walked through my high school doors that morning, and it was like suddenly my hormones had changed, and girls, for the first time in my life, started looking better than, you know, like a dead raccoon laying alongside the road. But honestly, Don, I was the most shy, bashful kid growing up, and the thought of saying hi to a girl, let alone actually speaking to one, or heaven forbid, actually asking one out on a date, you know, it just almost made me sick to my stomach. But I noticed that a lot of the guys in our high school that were good in sports, and they'd wear their high school letter jackets around, and they always had girls hanging all over them. So I thought, well, that's it. All I got to do is earn myself a letter jacket, and the chicks will come to me. So, like, you know, many Minnesota, South Dakota kids, you know, their first thought is you want to be a high school football player. So I thought, I'm going out for the football team. Well, you know, and I was 6 foot tall, weighed about 135 pounds. And I remember when school got out that afternoon, I literally raced into the boys' locker room, and my gym teacher was the head football coach, Coach Schaefer. And I remember I was so excited, Dunn. I go, Coach Schaefer, I'm coming out for football. And he never said anything. He just started laughing at me. And so he tried to talk me out of it, but I wouldn't listen. And so I went out, I figured out how all the equipment went on my body, and I followed about 20 other guys out onto the field. And we're at the 50-yard line, out in the middle of the field with Coach Schaefer. We got a big circle around him, and he's holding a football, explaining what we're going to do for practice, when all of a sudden he takes that football and he throws it as far as he can towards the end zone, and he hollers, Beardsley, fumble, get the ball. So I'm thinking, okay, I got to show Coach I know how to play this game. So I take off sprinting. I jump on that football, and about 15 other guys hog-piled on top of me. And when I got out of that mass of humanity and got out of that pile of guys, I remember my helmet was on crooked, my shoulder pads were sticking out, my football pants were down to the ground, and I'm thinking, there's not a girl alive worth going through this. And so, Dunn, you know, you've heard this story before, but I quit. I walked off the field. My entire football career lasted less than an hour. And a couple of days later, a buddy of mine said, well, Beard, you ought to come out for the cross-country team. I didn't know what a cross-country team was. And I remember I had two questions for him. And the first being, so tell me, what is this cross-country? He said, oh, it's fun. We run through the fields, up and down the hills, through the woods, jumping over logs and creeks. And I thought, well, gosh, I'll be out in the woods. That's kind of right up my alley. But my second more important question to him was, do they tackle you in cross-country running? So I went out for my very first day and been doing it ever since. How about you, Don?
Oh, Lord. Well, Beards, my story's kind of similar. I was a farm kid and went to a country school, a one-room country school. And then we got bused to Lenox High School in South Dakota. And I went from a class of 1. I was a valedictorian of my 7th grade year, top of my class. Of course, I was only one in 7th grade. Yeah, so the whole school had 13 kids in it. And I went to a class of like 130 kids. And so I didn't know anything about sports and you're kind of thrown into the mix with all these kids. You just want to fit in and not get picked on and stuff. And I had one guy that was a really good friend of mine. His name's Chuck Jepson. And if you ever hear this, I'll always remember this. Chuck was just a neighbor, lived about 2-3 miles up the road from us, and he knew who I was. And he just kind of took me under his wing. He said, yeah, Mike, we're going to play football. 9th graders, we're going to go out for football. And I thought, gosh, he's asked me to go out to play football, to be on the team. I was so excited that somebody even, wanted me to participate. And so I went out for football. And I remember the first day I told myself, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. That's how you're going to get hurt if you're hesitant and stuff. So I wasn't afraid. And I was a farm kid, and I'd stick my nose in there and try as hard as I could. And I did all right. I played 9th grade football, and I got to play on the defensive backfield because I wasn't very big, but I wasn't afraid to, tackle guys and stuff like that. And it was a great time. The training, I enjoyed that. But the one thing I really didn't appreciate about football, and I won't name any names, but our coach, I don't think you could ever satisfy the guy. Football coaches yell an awful lot.
Right.
And I just didn't care. No matter what you did, it seemed like they find something they could yell at you about. And I liked the teammates. I liked the working out, but I really didn't appreciate, it seems like I was always people are always getting yelled at. And the other thing I noticed was that when we'd run laps, because it seemed like we ran a lot of laps for punishment or for training, I'd be one of the first guys that could do like 2 or 3 laps around the football field. There were 2 or 3 older guys, upperclassmen, that would maybe get there, finish before I would. But I'd be one of the, top 10% of the guys running I guess you'd call it distance, like a half mile or whatever it is in training. And so at the end of the cross football season, my friend, again, Chuck, said, hey, now we're going to do winter track. And in the spring, we're going to go out for track. I didn't know what track was, other than I knew it was running and jumping and stuff. And he said, that'll get us ready for football next fall. And I said, great. And so I went out for track, and I didn't know anything about it. And so they figure out pretty fast who's fast and who's slow. They line you up on the track, and they do some 100-yard sprints. And I was not in the top 50% of the shorter things. But again, I could do distance a little better, run a mile or so. I'd be one of the first ones back. And so I remember my first race was a mile. And I did the mile, and I didn't come close to getting first. I remember my time was 5 minutes and 26 seconds.
Mike, that's good. Your first mile ever.
I didn't know, but I know I wasn't last. There were quite a few guys ahead of me, but I knew there was a couple guys behind me. And so I felt good that I wasn't the last guy in, even though there's nothing wrong with that. But what I really remember is my coach, and his name is Gene Borman, and Coach Borman's still doing well. And he came up to me, and I was bent over trying to not pass out because I was trying to breathe. I would have breathed through my ears. I was so winded. And he put his hand on the small of my back, and he bent over, and he had the stopwatch in his hand. I couldn't even read it. My eyes were blurry. And he goes, wow, 5:26 for a freshman. He said, that's not bad. He goes, you've got potential. And he was so calm and positive. You might as well told me I just won the lottery, because it really did leave an impression on me that it was such a positive experience. I didn't mind the work ethic part of running, and it was a lot of work, but I really appreciated that he appreciated my effort. And the next week he said, who wants to run a mile? And my hand shot up in the air, and I was a miler from that point on. And I remember I got down to 5:11 my freshman year. And so I really enjoyed track. It was a lot of work. And I told Coach Borman, I said at the end of track, I said, Coach Borman, I think I'll go out for cross country, because I did know about cross country, and they ran like 2.2 miles, and I kind of enjoyed running. And he goes, Mike, you're a pretty good football player. He goes, I always wanted to play football, but he said, I couldn't, I wasn't big enough. And he goes, it's totally up to you, but he goes, you can do whatever you like. And so, he wasn't really saying, I'd love to have you. Come on, we're so excited. He was kind of saying, it's really your decision. I think you can play football and be successful at that, or you can try cross country. And I'm just glad I took the road of cross country, because I'm not sure I would have had much of a football career if I would have stayed in that sport. And so that's really, I think when I think about it, what got me into running was really that friend of mine, Chuck, who invited me out to go out for football, that got, kind of broke the ice and made me part of a team. And, I think as young people, that's what we're always looking for is that level of acceptance, to fit in, not to be the loner, that weird guy that doesn't do anything. I got to be the weird guy that ran all the time, but that was okay. People seemed to kind of appreciate that I was out there doing something, trying to be constructive. But that's how I got started, was football, kind of a failed football career. And then just kind of the positive encouragement that runners give each other. A lot of my teammates on the track team after that first mile came up and said, "Nice job. You didn't get last," and things like that. And I thought, wow, this is kind of cool. And so, Dick, do you remember your first race, official race?
I really don't, because I was on the, luckily we had a JV team, when I first got out there, because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to run any meets. So I don't really remember any of those first few meets. I remember more when I became a senior and my second year of cross country, when I kind of got a little bit better, and I was.
Now, hang on a second. You never ran varsity as a junior?
I for some reason, I must have not a lot of real good memories from back then, because I can't remember exactly.
Girl memories.
I think I might have made the varsity for a meet or two at the end of the season.
So did you letter as a junior? Did you get a letter?
I don't think I did. And so, but Mikey, here's what I do remember. I remember when the season got over with, and I didn't run another step until, and I didn't go out for track the next spring or anything, because that's open and fishing season here in Minnesota, and but I had already set a goal for myself once our season ended in the fall of 1973, and that was this. It was when school got out for summer vacation at the end of May. My goal was to run every single day. And I did. I ran every single day that summer. I didn't run real long, real far, very fast or anything like that. But I came back for my senior year of high school, my second year of cross country. And I guess we didn't talk about this earlier, but my first run of my cross country career was the first day I went out for practice. And it was I thought, around the block run, which turned into 3.2 miles. And I had to walk the last mile. By the time I got back to the school, all my coach and my teammates had already showered and gone home. But
oh my Lord.
I know. But you know what? A lot of people might be disheartened by that, but I wasn't. I thought, I go, I don't know how just far I ran and walked, but I made it. I mean, it's the furthest I'd ever gone in my life. But again, I wasn't very good at it. But then, so I ran every day that following summer. And I came back for my second year of cross country, and it was exactly the 1 year to the day that we did that, what I called the round the block run, which was 3.2 miles long. But this time, all my teammates finished behind me instead of finishing in front of me. So
that 1 year you went from the worst to first.
Yeah,
on your team.
Yes,
cool.
And it just showed me that. And I tell you, it was something that really has echoed with me throughout my life since then. And, it's all about, doing hard work and believing in yourself. And, it would have been easy to give up. But again, like you said, you had encouragement from teammates and I had, and coaches, and so did I. And nobody ever made fun of me for, not being very good. Part of it was, I think, because we didn't have very many guys out on the team, so we needed everybody we could.
They didn't discourage you. They needed you.
Yeah.
But, I think what you said, Dick, is so important. When you did that first run and everybody was gone, nobody was there but you. But what I heard coming across is that sense of fulfillment, that sense of, like accomplishment. And, nobody can, if you could bottle that,
I know.
You can't put a price on it. When you do something that you didn't think you could do, and, even though other people might not think it was that big a thing, the Boston Marathon just was last week, and, you just watch thousands and thousands and thousands of people. I've seen so many photos of people crossing the finish line. And I tell you, the look on their faces, it's worth $1 million.
It is.
And I know you've said that many times, when you finish a marathon, can change your life, and it in so many positive ways. And it just changing finishing a training run. What that did that day, kind of set you off on your course.
Oh, it did. It gave me, more confidence in myself, and I started to, kind of believe in myself a little bit. It got my courage up a little bit to, be a little more forward.
Did you ask a girl out?
Exactly.
Now? Did you get a date?
You know what? You know what my first date was? She was a cheerleader on our cross country team. And
Wow.
yeah, I took her to the homecoming dance, and she said yes. I won't mention her name. I don't want to embarrass her or anything. And I think we only went out one time, but hey, it was a start, you know. And you got to start somewhere, right, Mikey?
There you go. Running gives you confidence in many aspects.
Yeah,
That's cool.
and listen, you don't have to be an Olympic champion to get confidence and be motivated and challenged, you know, by running. I mean, you know, whether you're a 208 marathoner or a 408 marathoner or slower than that, it's the fact of you know, a person making that commitment and dedicating the time and the effort to put into it, and then crossing that finish line, whatever finish line it is, whether it be in a race, in life, whatever it is, it's very satisfying.
You know, it kind of leads into my next thought. When did you really know this was for you? I mean, was it that first run when you finished that imaginary finish line and everybody else was gone? I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know if there's ever a real distinct moment where something clicks.
Yeah, but
you know, it's probably
done
do you
for
remember
me.
anything
I
like
think
that?
it was. I remember when I finished that 3.2 mile run and I got done, and you know, I didn't know how far it was at the time. At the time, I thought it was about a 20 miler or something, you know. But
Felt like it.
they
Yeah.
told me the next day it was 3.2 miles, and it was like, wow. It seemed, for me anyhow, it was such an accomplishment at the time. And, you know, now, you know, if I'm not going to run at least 3, 4, 5 miles, why even put your shoes on? You know, I tell myself now. And so for me, that was a huge thing.
You know, I think it's kind of interesting because I've heard other people say similar things. And I guess for me, it was that first race, you know, when you finish and you get that sense of accomplishment, or somebody says, nice job, you know.
Right.
I know there's these, the endorphins that we get, oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine. There's all these happy drugs that our body, I don't know if they're drugs, but they're hormones that you could they're like a drug. And those things fire and you get that sense of pleasure or, you know, what it is in your brain, but something connects. And I'm just always surprised, you know, I still have that to this day, and I don't run, I cycle. And I'm out biking, and I'm out biking with Karen, my wife, and we're out there in the mornings. It's beautiful. And you go, where is everybody? You know, why these roads should be packed with people out. And there are runners out there, and there's other cyclists out there. But they're such a minority still, you know, and I just always feel so bad for those people that they're either missing it or they just haven't had the opportunity or, you know, and again, I'm not sure if everybody's wired the same way where, you know, that first attempt they make.
I don't think we are.
No, I don't know. I think we know we're not wired the same.
No.
Really anything. So let's back up, just kind of wrapping up this high school segment, if you would. You know, you mentioned your coach and your teammates, you know, and you kind of said it was a kind of a, you know, your team culture. You know, was it encouraging? It was because in my experience, I haven't run into too many runners or aren't good guys.
Right.
And coaches. I mean, if you're coaching that sport, you better be nice to your runners because they're working their tails off
and
for
Mikey,
you.
when I was in high school, so cross country was a very minor sport, you know, like it is at a lot of schools, unfortunately.
It still is.
But
Yeah.
I tell you, a lot of the guys on our team, they were wrestlers, so they came out, you know, for cross country to get in shape for the wrestling season that started, you know, for the winter sports and stuff. And I tell you what, those guys weren't real talented runners, but my goodness, those guys were the toughest runners I've ever seen and met. They would run through a brick wall. They would be puking their guts. It didn't matter. Those wrestlers are tough. I'm telling you.
Like our kind of guy. You know, and of course, we're going to talk about some wrestlers we met in college years later, the Brant boys. But, and so, and I think wrestling is you know, when people say what's the toughest sport, you know, and as a runner, you say, well, I think our sport is so pure. You know, all you need is you don't even need a decent pair of shoes. You know, a lot of guys, I remember the Flandre Indian guys would run barefoot. You know, and you hear about,
Mikey, and the nice thing about running is, you know, I mean, wrestling's a great sport, but you got to have a partner to wrestle with. You're not going to wrestle against yourself unless you throw yourself up against the wall or something.
Well, I was going to say, you know, I think running, you know, it's pure, but, you know, wrestling? I mean, you get down, it's you against one other dude.
Right.
And you know, it's your skill, it's your strength, it's your speed.
And stamina, too.
Oh, you're talking, you know, pure. It's a pure sport. You know, there's no team. the tactics are pretty much you do what you got to do.
Right.
And running's pretty much the same way. But, in high school, so your senior year, you came back, you're number one. Is there some memory of high school? I guess let's just say, what was your do you have a highlight, a high school memory?
I do.
I know. Okay, what was it?
So Mikey, and it's not a real good memory. I mean, it's not one that of winning a championship or anything like that, because I never made it to the state meet in Minnesota in cross country or track. But I'll never forget my goal when I was a senior was to try to win every race, and that I won a couple times, but I so wanted to break 16 minutes. Now, back then, we ran 3 miles, not 5 kilometers. And I'll never forget this. It's getting towards the end of the season, and we're on a real flat course, and I'm winning the race. And my godfather, rest his soul, Joe Ross, who was a big inspiration in my running and keeping me going and stuff like that, with about a quarter mile to go, he goes, "Dick, you're going to break 16 minutes. And I'm tying up and stuff. And I come across the finish line, and I hear my time, 16:01. And Mikey, you've known me for, it's getting close to 50 years now. I don't drop many F-bombs, but he goes 16:01. And this big F-bomb comes out of my mouth.
Oh, Beards, I have a hard time believing that.
Mikey, I swear to the good Lord. And there's all these parents and teachers and spectators there. And
Dick, I said your proudest moment, not your most, not your most embarrassing moment.
But Mikey, that's the only one I can really remember that stands out. And as soon as it came out of my mouth, I immediately stopped and started apologizing to everybody that was in the area. I felt absolutely terrible. So I don't have a whole lot of proud moments in high school because I wasn't very good. I loved doing it. But that's the one that race that day stands out more than any other race I ever did in high school.
So, as far as like a dream, a fantasy, a goal was always
I know what it was.
Winning a race, breaking 16 minutes.
Anything
else come to mind?
Yeah, my goal, Mike, was to make the state meet. And, that never happened. And it wasn't without trying. I mean, I gave it my very, very best, but our team never qualified. So I would have had to qualify as an individual, and I wasn't able to do that. But, Mikey, let me ask you, your proudest moment. Yeah. I'm not going to say what it is, but I'm almost certain I know what it is.
And I think you and I have talked about this before. I ran as a sophomore. I went to a running camp at South Dakota State between my freshman and sophomore year. So I finished track. I really, ran the mile. I ran 5:11, and I saw in the paper they were having a distance running camp. In 1972, Jay Dirksen, the coach of South Dakota State University, was hosting a high school running camp. And I remember it was a week long, and it cost $90. And that was room and board and coaching.
Wow.
Now, $90 felt like $900 to me. And I saw that, and something clicked. And I thought, man, if I want to be a runner and I want to do well, I need to learn, my coach, Gene Borman, was wonderful, and he was very inspiring and very motivational. But I thought, I want to learn how to be the best runner I can be. And I asked my folks, and I've never really asked for, being a farm kid, I knew, we didn't have a lot of money laying around or anything, or at least I didn't think we did. And I asked my folks if I could go, and they said yes. And, I went up there, and I went from running 1 or 2 miles a day, and nobody on this podcast is going to believe it. We started running 15 to 20 miles a day.
I can't believe that.
For 5 days in a row. Jay Dirksen, Rich Greeno, Russ Strandy, I could go, Lyle Clausen were all the coaches. And, back in those days, Arthur Lydiard in New Zealand had been coaching these fantastic New Zealand runners. And Jay was kind of modeled his training. It was long, slow distance. It was building that huge base of endurance. So we weren't running these miles fast. You couldn't. We'd have been dead if we would have. But we'd get up in the morning and we'd go run 5 miles and we'd have breakfast. Then you'd go lay in your room, because then right before lunch, they'd have us go do another 5 miles. And we get done and then have a class on running. And then we'd lay in our rooms. And then we'd get up about 3 or 4 and go do another 5 miles. And then we'd go have supper. And then before we'd go to bed that night, they had us run another 5 miles.
Gosh.
Well, I think their theory was there were like 13 guys and we had one girl. We had a girl come to this camp, Jane Whiff. And she stayed in a whole dormitory by herself, and us other guys all got to stay in a dorm together. That poor girl had to be just lonely as all get outs. But it was so much fun despite the fatigue. I think Jay's idea was to keep these high school kids in line. We'll just keep them so tired they won't be able to do any mischief or get in trouble. But we survived it. We got to the end of it, and I remember Jay. We had a race. After doing like 80 to 100 miles those first 5 days, he finishes the camp on Saturday with a 3-mile race. And I couldn't remember my time. I barely remember the event, but I do remember Jane Whiff, the high school girl from Fremont, South Dakota. She was 1 year younger than me. I was like 15. She beat me. I mean, I was just so tired. So was she, and so was everybody else. But you know what? At the end of that, everybody patted you on the back. Everybody was giving you high fives. Everybody was saying, nice job, good job. And it was such a positive environment. And I came back and then ran cross country as a sophomore and junior and a senior. And, my high school dream was always, to win a state championship. Those athletes who win state championships are just, you're the top.
It's rare.
And, it is. It's hard. And in cross country, we did have divisions. We had 3 divisions. So there would be 3 guys that had to beat everybody else. One guy has to beat everybody in their class of schools. And so as a sophomore, I remember I got 54th. And, I just ran as hard as I could. And I finished 54th, and I was the second guy on our team. And I thought, wow, hopefully a whole bunch of these guys ahead of me are going to graduate next year, and so maybe I can move up a little bit. And my junior year, I went back, did the camp again. I just loved going to that running camp because it was such a
good
positive
one.
environment. Oh, it was so good. So I ran that, had a good season, won a few cross country races. And I went to the state meet, and I thought I'd be in the top 10. You kind of know what kind of shape you're in. You know what the competition's like. I had a bad race. I don't know. I don't remember, much of it. I finished 20th, and there's nothing to be ashamed about that. I just remember the top 15 got medals.
Oh.
I didn't even finish in the top 15, and I was really disappointed, and I won't say devastated because it's just a race, it's
right.
not the end of the world. But, when you have goals and you fall short, it is kind of it's a blow. Well, you have 2 choices. Either, just bow your head and give up and say, well, I guess this isn't really going to be happening. Or you double your efforts, and say, I got to do something to change this. And went back to the running camp before my senior year. And I'll never forget, I was out running with Russ Strandy at this running camp. And we were talking about the upcoming cross-country season. And there was a couple of good runners that were juniors like I was. Dwight Guimar out of Scotland was one of them. There was a kid out of Redfield. John Lindbergh was a good runner. And I said, yeah, man, those guys are going to be back. They're going to be tough. And I remember I said to him, and I don't think I was fishing for a compliment or, I said, geez, Russ, what do you think? Who do you think is going to be the top, Class A runner? And he goes, he looked me right in the eye. He goes, Mike, I think you are.
Wow.
And I tell you, I get chills. It chokes me up to this day.
That gave me chills.
Up until this moment, at that moment, I really never, made it part of like reality. It was a dream. It wasn't something I'd really, I wanted it, but I hadn't really thought about, this could happen. And it was really, I'll always remember Russ for that. That's a pivotal moment in my life. And he said, Mike, I think you can win it. And so I went into that cross country season. I won all my races except one. Larry Beardsley, who's a Class AA, he was a defending Class AA state champion. I ran up against him at the South Dakota State University Invitational, and we were together till about a half mile to go. And Larry went into his kick, I guess you'd call it. And I disappointed myself. I'm not sure. I think mentally, I kind of thought, wow, there he goes. He's making his move now. He's better than me. And I always wondered, did I really give 100%? And whenever you don't give 100%, there's a lot of self-doubt. And I felt bad that I kind of gave up a little bit mentally, I think. And I thought I'm never going to do that again. And so we got to the state meet, and long story short, I ended up winning it. And,
hey, Mikey, how exciting though. I mean, nobody's ever going to, you know what? Times come and go. But winning a race, championships, that's something that will be with you. You take it to your grave with you.
It is. It's one of, when you say what are some proud moments, well, you get married. That's a pretty proud day in your life. You have children. Those are proud days. But when there's life events that you always will remember, that is one of them. And I'll tell you, what really drove it home for me was my dad was there and my family, my older
Mikey,
brother,
I was just going to say, your parents, and I knew your mom and dad and everything and your brothers and sisters, but your mom and dad, they had to have been so proud of you.
I hope so. our parents, and like a lot of kids of that generation, my folks are children of the Depression. They were born in the 1920s, came up in the 30s when people were really having a hard time. My dad was a World War II vet, and he did not show emotion. And he would come to all my races, and he would be there. And I appreciated the fact that they came and supported me. They never really encouraged my running, but they never discouraged my running.
And that's important.
If I wanted to run, they were saying fine, and they let me go to the camp. If I needed shoes, they always bought me some good running shoes. They made sure I had what I needed. But not once did they ever say, "Geez, maybe you should get out and do your training today." Have you been running lately?
Well, Mikey, that's because you did it every day. They didn't have to tell you that.
I think if I didn't do it, they'd have been worried. But I guess the point I was going to get to is my father would always, no matter what race, he would always say, "Yeah, you did pretty good, but," there's always that but,
Right.
And he kind of kept me honest. He never said, "Wow, you're the best," or anything like that. But at the state meet, I crossed the finish line, and they give you the medal right when you cross the finish line. And I had it in my hand, and the first person I went to after the finish was my dad.
Oh my God. Okay, you're going to make me start crying here.
It still gets me. And I handed him the medal, and he shook my hand. And, that was the first time he shook my hand twice in my life. That day and the day I got married.
Okay, Mikey, you're giving me shivers to I feel like I'm holding on to an electric fence right now.
Well, Beards, that's why, running is just such a unique thing. And you don't have to win state championships.
No.
But, when you set goals and you have people that are rooting for you and supporting you and hoping you do well. And, my wife to this day says, when I'm still competing, I'm still riding my bike, I'm still going out and doing goofy events.
Absolutely,
and stuff.
you are.
And she goes, "No, what are you trying to prove? Who are you trying to, and she goes, "You still want your dad's, love and acceptance." And that could be part of this. We all want that in our lives, and we want it from the most significant people in our lives. Beards, I think our friendship, I've always appreciated your support and encouragement, and I think it goes both ways. And, when you have people like that in your life that are, you want to, I don't know if the word is please them, but you want to make them proud.
Right.
And you want to make yourself proud more than anybody. That's the first person. And so, yeah, high school, it's a unique time, and I really feel for kids that go through it. And I was just fortunate that I found an endeavor that I enjoyed, that people actually, even though I was kind of the weird guy who ran all the time, people seemed to kind of like, they appreciated that I was putting that much work and time into it. And I remember I had a classmate one time, and I came in from a 10-mile run in high school, and he goes, what do you think why do you run so much? He goes, what do you think it's ever going to get you? And I remember I kind of fumbled around, and I kind of said, well, I hope maybe I'll get a scholarship someday, and I was trying to come up with a rational reason. And now I realize you don't need to have a rational reason to go out and run and to, do the things that make you happy.
No, and Mike, we talked about coaches and, adults that have influenced us. And I'll never forget this. So, I wasn't much of playing sports, but I did try, in Minnesota, just about every kid plays hockey or tries to play hockey,
Oh my God.
And I tried to play hockey. I wasn't very good. And so my football coach, Coach Schaefer, he was the head hockey coach also.
That guy coached everything.
Oh, he did. He was a great guy. In fact, I believe he's still alive. He's got to be close to 90 now. But I'll never forget this. So I'm a senior in high school, and I have Coach Schaefer in gym class, and he comes up to me. It's right before hockey season's going to start. He goes, Beards. He goes, now that you're a senior, you can't play on the JV team anymore. He goes, I see you out running every morning during study hall. He goes, maybe you ought to put a little more effort into your running. Mikey, I haven't had a pair of skates on since. It was some of the best advice I'd ever gotten in my life.
I was going to say, Dick, you look like a hockey stick to
right.
me more than a hockey player. But, going back to, did you have any heroes, running heroes? Or I know in Minnesota, there had to be some sports. They've had some fantastic athletes, Fran Tarkenton and people like that, and the baseball players, Rod Carew and Herman Killebrew and all those guys. How about running?
So running,
did you have a running hero?
Again, Mikey, I kind of was a late comer to the sports. I didn't really follow running, and road races were a dime. They weren't
popular.
A ton of them like they are now. But the kind of my running hero to me was in high school, he was my best friend, George Ross. George was 1 year in front of me. His mom and dad were my godparents, and he had 2 younger brothers and 3 younger sisters, and they were like a big family. And George was a stud. I mean, seriously, the guy was. He was a stud. He made it to the state meet and got a full ride scholarship to Mankato State University. And I just always looked up to him. And he lived out in the country. And I can still remember. So he graduated in 74. And that summer I'm getting ready for my, between my junior and senior year. And he was getting ready to go to college. So we ran Pertner every day. And we had this 10-mile loop on these country roads with hills. And, I tell you what, after 3-4 miles, we'd be yapping and stuff, and then it turned into like a gosh dang road race. And I could never beat him, but I could stay pretty close to him. But I just always looked up to him and admired.
He was supportive, encouraging.
Oh yeah, he was encouraging. Yeah. And of course his mom and dad really were inspirational or inspired me to keep running and whatnot. So yeah, that's probably my high school running hero was my teammate who was a year ahead of me, George Ross.
That's so cool.
How about you, Mike?
Well, let's think about this. 1970 to 1975.
Oh,
what American?
Prefontaine's got to be.
Steve Prefontaine. He was a rebel without a cause. He was the James Dean of running, and the guy was he wasn't your atypical. He was your atypical runner. He wasn't a typical runner. The guy, was aggressive. He was strong. He was a front runner. He wasn't afraid of anyone. The typical runner is kind of an introvert who kind of goes off by himself, and in a race, yeah, you run as fast as you can, but if somebody elbows you in the ribs or something, you kind of say, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, I got in your way," or something. We're kind of non-confrontational people, okay?
Not him.
Not him. He was the opposite of that, and I almost said kick butt in a different way.
Or he would try to stir it up.
He would. In the 72 Munich Olympics, that first year at the running camp, the Munich Olympics were on.
Wow.
And so we were watching that live on TV, and Lassie Viren winning the 5 and the 10K. And of course, Prefontaine was in the 5K. And he ended up 4th. And man, from that point on, though, but the guy ran himself into the ground. And
that race he ran in 72 was one of the gutsiest performances I've ever seen any athlete do. I mean, he went for it. And
he did.
He went for it, and he just came up a little bit short from winning a medal. But, boy, you got to give him kudos for doing what he did.
A lot of people forget he was 21 years old at that time, and so he was still coming into his own. And a lot of people wonder, and, the saddest day, one of the saddest days of my life, I never met Steve Prefontaine, but he was a hero. We all kind of emulated him. We all kind of wanted to be like Pre.
Right.
And I remember coming in from a run. It was in the spring of 75, so I just was finishing my track season that year. And if I remember the date right, I think it was May 25th, 1975.
It was the day I graduated from high school.
Yeah, there was a track meet in Eugene, and Pre ran the 5K, and Frank Shorter was there, and they finished first and second. And we didn't have the internet. We didn't know any of these results till like a month later when Track and Field News would come out or something. But it made the national news that night when Steve Prefontaine was killed in a car accident. And I didn't know about it that night. We didn't hear about it. It probably got on the Associated Press the next day. And I remember it coming in. I'd been out doing chores or something, and my dad was in the house. And my dad, I knew something was up. And he goes, "Hey, Mike," he said, "that famous runner." And I said, and then when he said that, I said, "Prefontaine." He goes, "Yeah." He said, He died last night in a car wreck. And Dick, I kid you not, I sat down on the couch. I had to just sit.
Wow.
I don't know why. It kind of hit me because it was like unreal. It's like at first I wanted to say no way. That just couldn't have happened, because he is such a dynamic, energetic individual. And I remember I just sat there, and I knew my dad, I probably appreciated it at the time, but he knew how much I liked him, and we had, he was a hero. And,
sure.
And man, when your hero, I hate to say falls, or a tragedy like this occurs, and my dad knew it was not going to be easy news to give me, and he did, because I would have found out eventually. And I remember I had a race the next weekend. It was the state AAU. They used to have the state AAU track meet back in the day, and it was in Aberdeen, South Dakota. And Fran Hogestrad, a good friend of mine who is a shot putter, discus thrower, a gal named Mary Beekler, who was a hurdler, and Al Stropmeyer, who's one of my little training partners, and the four of us got in a car, and we drove all the way to Aberdeen. And I decided I'm only going to run the 2 mile. I usually did the 2 mile and the mile. And I thought, I'm going to run just the 2 mile. And all I kept thinking about was how Prefontaine would run a 2 mile. And there was a guy from Canada named Bob Cook. And I met him. And, runners, I introduced myself. And he said, hi, yeah, my name is Bob Cook. And I said, he goes, I've never run 2 miles before. We run 3,000 meters in Canada. They ran metric.
Sure.
He goes, it's a little different for me. And as you know, 2 miles is like 200 meters longer than 3,000 meters. So, it's not a lot of difference. And I kind of thought, man, this guy sounds like he's pretty good. And so we took off, and I don't remember, we went through the first mile in like 4:45 or something. But I remember with a half mile to go, I made the decision, I'm going to make the pre-move, and it's to go with 2 laps to go. I'm not going to wait.
And that's a long way to go.
It is. And I'm getting emotional thinking about it, because when you make the commitment, you're going to go. It's from that point, you're going to go as hard as you can to the finish. And I thought, well, pre would do nothing less.
Right.
And I ended up, I remember my time was like 9:37, which was my best 2 mile ever up to that time. And I won the race. And, I just felt really good about, Pre would have been proud.
He was looking down and clapping his hands, Mikey.
I hope so. But, at that time, that was important to me. And I thought, and I could have stayed around, and we could have ran the mile later that night or something. And I thought, nope. I did it. I ran my 2 mile as hard as I could.
You did. You did it in honor of Pre.
I did. And so we're just going to let it go at that.
That's cool.
Dick, I think we're going to get a little long here.
I know it.
And this has been awesome, bud. Oh, I know. This never happens. Lucky that the cell phones now don't charge you long distance rates, or we'd be busted by now whenever we get to start yapping with each other. I think, this has kind of been good. We've kind of laid a little foundation about high school. And then kind of leading up to, now post-high school, I know I was dreaming of going to South Dakota State University, because I'd gone to that running camp. And Jay Dirks, and I remember after the state meet, wrote me a nice letter and stuff like that. And so I don't think there was a lot of doubt where I wanted to go. And I know then I'm curious, and maybe we'll save this for our next podcast. What got you to run in college then? And I don't know if you want to give us a little taste of that.
Well, let's just say this. Mike, I had no intentions of running beyond high school. I really didn't. I mean, I loved running, but I knew I wasn't good enough to probably compete. And so where I went to school, I was fortunate, and we'll talk about it maybe next podcast, but they just happened to have a cross-country running program and a track team and track running program, and happened to have, one of the greatest coaches I've ever had coach me, and we'll leave it at that for right now.
Well, let me just kind of wrap this up though. So you're telling me Dick Beardsley, Mr. 208 marathoner, finished high school and really had no aspirations of running beyond that, and you just happened to go to a school that just happened to have a cross-country program, and you thought, well, everything kind of fell into place. I guess I could keep doing it.
That's exactly right, Mike.
Oh my gosh. All right. All right.
It's a good story.
Well, it is, and I hope you guys will come back and listen to the next episode. And this has been fun for me. I don't know about for Dick, but
of course,
anybody out there, our goal is, with all of this is, if you leave tonight feeling a little inspired, motivated, hopefully a little bit entertained, we've succeeded. I know I'm feeling inspired, motivated, entertained by Dick. I always am, and so I hope you guys are too.
So we'll see everybody next time, and thanks, Mikey. You're an inspiration to me. You've been one of my best friends for almost 50 years, and I'm having a ball doing this.
Let's go another 50, bud.
All right, pal.
All right, talk to you later, bud.
Bye-bye.
Bye.